Hello, everyone.
Welcome to the Queers of Time podcast.
I'm Matt.
I'm James.
I'm Kenny.
And I'm Kat.
And this is a podcast to talk about all the gay stuff in the Wheel of Time.
Because we're gay and we like the Wheel of Time.
And as usual, thank you so much to our fellow venerator of Soirain, Lurks. We are unbelievably grateful. It's crazy that she's been supporting us as long as she has through all of the chaos. Thank you. And then also thank you to Kevin, who helps out with, promo videos. And then Travis, who helps out with transcripts. We very much appreciate it.
Today, we are going to talk about something that often gets overlooked in the Wheel of Time, and that is religion, both in the series and without it. Because a lot of us, given that this podcast is called The Queers of Time and not the Cishets of Time, have religious trauma. Some more than others, and some with religions that aren't your typical, what you would think in Middle America. So we have a special guest today on. Poppy Tea Leaf is what you may know her as on Twitter. We had a great chat about religion and Wheel of Time during JordanCon, and I thought it'd be so much fun to have her on the podcast. But Camille unfortunately could not make it, and James is allergic to religion. So I'm just joking, James. James also couldn't make it.
Yeah.
So, Poppy, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came into the Wheel of Time fandom, and just, general stuff.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on. I'm happy to be here to talk about sort of my journey through Wheel of Time, because religion played a big part in my interaction with it. I first read the series when I was in 8th grade. So that was back in 1996, I think.
Oh, wow.
Let's just say Lord of Chaos was the most recently published book. And so I was very much the daughter of immigrants at that time, and so that had a big effect on what I brought to the books while I was reading them. And then so there was no internet or Twitter or anything like that in the 90s. So basically my fandom was all by myself, except for my one friend who introduced me to the books. And then, then I got into Twitter of Time just after season 1 aired. I think I was already on Twitter and I was following celebrities because that's what I was doing. And then more and more Wheel of Time stuff started coming on my timeline. I'm like, oh, okay, debate is fun. And I like talking about this series. And so, yeah, I've been like a member of Twitter of Time ever since, I guess, January 2022. But yeah, that's how I came into this community.
Nice. Yeah, I feel like a lot of us definitely came in like we were discovered by other Twitter of Time people. Like I first tweeted about the show coming out in, it would have been February of 2020. I technically joined Twitter of Time like just a few weeks from lockdown. And then Twitter Time became one of my only social interactions.
Oh, no.
So I didn't get into reading, I think a lot of listeners know, I didn't get to reading Wheel of Time until I was in law school. I was attracted by the cover art, the Daryl Sweet cover art, not that bland stuff, the bland, like, no images, mass market paperbacks we have now. And Kat, you were pretty new to it too, right?
Yeah, I didn't get into it so I got into it the same year that A Memory of Light came out. So that was in 2012, I think. Okay,
yeah, that sounds...
2013.
2013, okay. Yeah, so around between 2012, 2013. I don't remember if A Memory of Light had already come out or was in the process of coming out. But yeah, I read Eye of the World not realizing that it was this big, long series, and it was too late. I was sucked in, and I was along for the ride, and then I found out, like, oh, shit, this is a big commitment, but it was kind of the perfect time to find out about it, because the series was over. And so I didn't have to do like, the big chunks of time, like waiting in between book releases.
Yeah.
And some of the ways that the books ended, I don't know how I would have survived with that, to be completely honest. Like, I think at the end of Fires of Heaven, and I'm like, what would I have done? What would I have done?
Yeah, especially that one.
I would have died. Even going into it, knowing that, like, there's obviously a lot more that happens, and I got spoiled on some things. Even knowing all of that, I was like, I can't imagine having to wait for the next book after this. Poppy, I don't know how you did it.
I usually had a backup series to start like right away, because otherwise withdrawal symptoms would start, and I'm like, I'd be sad and mopey for a few days. So yeah, I had to immediately dive into something else.
Understandable.
Yeah. So yeah, the topic of this episode being mostly religion. I think all three of us were raised in pretty religious households. I was raised Southern Baptist. I don't not affiliate with baptism anymore, which is to say I am sort of like agnostic leaning Baptist, if that makes sense. I don't talk about religion. I don't talk about my beliefs a lot. I have really weird out there, like, I believe that if spirituality is real or whatever, like as long as you're not hurting anybody, all religions are like sort of spokes on the same wheel. As long as you're not doing any harm. So like I wouldn't define myself as like a hardcore atheist by any means at all. So if y'all are comfortable, like what were you raised in, and what do you now identify as, I guess? Mm-hmm. And you don't have to answer if that's, and we can get that out if it's not.
No.
Okay.
You go ahead first, Poppy.
Okay. I was raised Muslim, and my parents were Syrian immigrants, and so it wasn't just them, it was like them and my uncle, and a whole community of people that that sort of came together in Philadelphia. So like we were all the Syrian community that also practiced the Muslim holidays together, and it was kind of like this culture that we grew up in. And so when we were growing up, the message was definitely, this is what Syrians do, and this is what Americans do, and so, like, you're not going to do what those Americans are doing, you're going to, we're going to do what we do. And I'm sure every, like, culture has its own form of, like, this is us, and this is, like, the culture, and we stick together with our brothers and our community, or sisters, or other siblings. But, yeah, so I had very much bought into it, and so I was like, this is what it means to be a Syrian, so I'm just going to be a Syrian, and I'm going to be a Muslim. But I had questions. I would, there were things I'm like, well, this doesn't make logical sense. And, when everybody's praying together, I didn't like that. So as I was growing older, I was like, I don't really like how, like, these people, like, organized religion just doesn't make sense to me. Islam on paper makes lots of sense to me, but, the way people interpret it and the way they try to force that on me, I was not a fan. And so, but I was also, in my school, I went to a predominantly Jewish school, so I was the Muslim subject matter expert, if you will. So I was friends with the granddaughter of a rabbi and the daughter of a pastor. So the three of us would have these interreligious discussions. So I'm very good at, I love telling people about my religion and comparing them to other religions, but yeah, practicing it, not so much.
That's awesome.
That is.
Yeah, so I have a similar, I think, religious background to Matt. I grew up in a very conservative Baptist background. I'm Canadian as well, so I don't know if there are sort of differences in that sense, because I know that Southern baptism is a different sort of animal. There's a lot of historical context to Southern baptism as well, where it's quite it's different in a lot. Southern baptism is racist.
Oh no, it is. It's very racist.
Yeah, absolutely.
There is a lot of racism. I mean, I think there's racism, period, in Christianity. That's just the way it is. You can fight me if you disagree, but that's just the way it is. In a way that's I think it manifests in a different way in other forms of baptism. And so I grew up in Toronto. Toronto is a very multicultural city. The church I went to was very multicultural. So it didn't have those same sort of notes to it, but still very conservative. My parents we went to church every Sunday. We went to prayer meeting on Wednesdays. I went to youth group. The summer camp that I went to was a Christian summer camp. Everything, my entire life existed in a Christian bubble. And I didn't know anything aside from school, really. That was really the only exposure I got to secular people, as we called them in church. The secular people. That was really the only exposure I got. And it's funny enough, it wasn't until, so after I graduated high school, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And I ended up doing a year at Bible college, at seminary. It was like this, it's like an intro year. And it was simultaneously the worst, but also the best year of my life. I learned a lot about people. I learned a lot about Christianity, and also Christianity in quotation marks. It was an eye-opening experience for me, and it really was a turning point in my life. That was kind of where I first started really examining my sexuality. Funny enough, was when I was in seminary and getting the chance to study the Bible in like the original language, and learning about the roots of words, and realizing like, wait a second, do we have it right? I feel like we may not have this. I feel like I may have been misled in some ways here. And yeah, I just remember it being a really eye-opening experience for me in that way, and then also a really disheartening experience because Christians can be kind of terrible, and like people in general can be, but conservative Christians, it's a very they're a very specific type, and it was, and I mean, this was, so I graduated high school in 2006, yeah. So this would have been 2007 or so, that I was in Bible college, and then Wheel of Time I didn't know about it until 2012, so a few years later. And so by that time, I was like already very much questioning religion as a whole, and then Wheel of Time introduced me to a very different take on religion and how to tackle religion, especially in a fantasy series that I hadn't really come across before, because, fantasy generally, it tends to mirror like sort of, traditional, like a traditional Christian way of viewing, like, religion. It mirrors that.
Right.
The names are different, but it does mirror that same sort of, there's this God overall, there's this like Christ-like being or something like that, and everyone worships this God. And there's only one.
Yeah.
But Wheel of Time it takes a very different approach to it.
Yeah, which is interesting. Yeah. Like, so Joseph Campbell's The Hero with a Thousand Faces basically discusses what I like to call the monomyth, like the one myth that most religions and cultures around the world share. We have Jesus Christ fits into that, what I think Michael Livingston called the Return of the King motif. And if that sounds familiar, it's because that's in another fantasy series.
Yes, indeed.
So
King Arthur?
Jesus, King Arthur, Luke Skywalker,
all of that,
Rand al'Thor,
Aslan in Chronicles of Narnia, like they all fall into that same sort of type.
And even Persephone, Ra, the sun god, like, and it's not just men. It's, there's a lot of women deities as well.
Yeah.
So like, it's fascinating because, Robert Jordan, I think by all accounts was a Christian that we know of, but he wasn't a Christian with the capital C conservative, capital C Christian.
Which is surprising because he's from Charleston.
Yeah,
Yes.
I know.
Yeah. Though I think Charleston does have some pockets of more progressive leaning.
Oh, does it? Okay.
Yeah.
It's possible. And just Poppy, I don't know how it is with the Muslim community and the Syrian American community, but at least in the United States, the Baptist religion used to be very progressive. It used to be a super progressive, theologically progressive, politically uninvolved sect. And then in the 1970s, with the rise of Nixon and Reagan, we got Pat Robertson, essentially there was a conservative takeover of the Southern Baptist Convention. So I pretty much say wholesale that Southern Baptists are a hate organization, basically. Which is not to say Baptists are, because what I love about Baptists is the fact that it's a very democratic type of organization. If you're in a church and we don't like this, we're just going to split off and create our own denominations. There's actually denominations of Baptists that require you to welcome LGBT people into your church. There are Baptist organizations that take firmly anti-racist stances. I know that there was a predominantly white church here in Minnesota, a Baptist church, and I passed a sign, and they were doing a reading of how to be an anti-racist. And I sort of grew up in a not liberal, but a more intellectual thing. So my whole thing was I never really had that indoctrination of only Christianity is the right way, and we will hurt those who don't believe in it. And it was only when I went to college that I realized that most Baptists weren't like that. My church actually left the Southern Baptist Convention in the 90s and recently repudiated it when they made that women in ministry vote.
God. Yeah.
I know.
Because that's the important. Don't worry about all of the allegations of sexual assault and abuse and everything like that. They don't need to be concerned about that. It's women being preachers. That's the concern. That's where they need to focus right now.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's awful to contemplate. I don't know how they can do it.
I think it's when this is their world. This is this is how they exist, and they don't know anything other than that. And it's not at all to excuse it. But when you've grown up generation after generation after generation with the same ideology, and it's been hammered into you.
Yeah.
This is what it produces, unfortunately.
Sadly.
I was just in such a weird place in my youth group, in my teenage years, my youth group. So small town, Baptist church. I also went to a small high school. My youth group, we would make fun of when we went to other church camps. And I know this is a Wheel of Time episode, but I think now we're just venting about, we're getting some of the venting out of the way.
Yeah.
We would go to these group youth conferences, and the other youth groups would go running and screaming down the aisle. They would start talking in voices and stuff. And my youth group, we would just look at each other.
Speaking in tongues?
We're are they being serious right now? Are these people actually screaming? And my exposure to Chronicles of Narnia, to Lord of the Rings, and Harry Potter all came through my youth group. In high school, most of my classmates would not read Harry Potter because these were country Southern Baptist kids. And this was the time, this was the mid-2000s when the anti-Harry Potter religious fervor was happening.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And the only place I got to talk about Harry Potter was with the kids in youth group because they were a lot of gay theater nerds.
That'll do it.
More than a few of those kids came out a little fruity at the end of.
Just a little bit fruity.
Yours truly included, but so it was very much a weird youth group, a our youth minister, she was young and apolitical. A lot of the youth group chaperones were progressive. Like, you could tell they were progressive. Like, a few guys started singing a homophobic version of, as like, which Backstreet Boy is gay or something. And
oh yeah, okay.
One of the chaperones was like, that's homophobia, and that's not very nice, and you shouldn't do that. It's not a Christian thing to do. And this is like in 2006, small town. So like, my upbringing was very much not the norm as far as Baptist churches go. But I think that's why. The Wheel of Time, it was easy to get into because it was just so multicultural, and that was what I grew up with. Like, I grew up reading different types of fantasy and not being restricted to just the Chronicles of Narnia.
Yeah, fantasy was my genre of preference, so, like, I'd been reading them all. I'd been reading Anne McCaffrey and Robert Jordan and David Eddings, who we shall not name anymore. And then Melanie...
David who?
David Eddings. He wrote some... Fantasy-wise, they were great. They were great worlds, good world building, good characters. He and his wife were not really nice people, and there was child abuse. Yeah.
Not so much.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I Googled his name. I was like, oops.
Like, ooh.
Yep.
We did an oopsie.
I learned lots of really good words from him. He was an English teacher. The grammar, I learned that really helped my grammar and vocabulary, but yeah, his worlds, his women were, a stereotype, and yeah. But yeah, that's what I was reading. I was reading any fantasy that was available. After, I was reading, let's see, Kate Elliott and Janie Wirtz and Robert Jordan and a few others, all of which were unfinished series, and I'm like, okay, we're gonna make a rule. No more big series until they're done.
Oops. Whoopsie.
And so, that's why I haven't read Game of Thrones yet.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, but I made an agreement with myself. I'm like, I'm gonna make this work. All of these fantasy series, like, they have religions, they have gods and goddesses, and somehow I'm just gonna fit it in with my worldview. I'm gonna just, like, smush it in there and say, like, and God exists with them as well. And, Allah is God. It's just Arabic for God. So, Islam believes in a lot of the same things as Christianity. Like, Jesus is one of our prophets.
Yeah.
He's human, but he's one of our prophets, and so is Abraham and Noah and everyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
Yeah, I feel like the progressive sects of most major world religions, both Western and Eastern, sort of reflect each other a bit more than they don't. Like,
oh, yeah.
The general tenets are the same.
Yeah.
If the names are... Which is like how The Wheel of Time is, like, such a great intro to, like, discovering worldviews that don't match your own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, like, and it's so funny how, like, so many, like, bigots and book cloaks, like, oh, this is like Robert Jordan wrote this show, and they're making it woke, and like how could you be so conservative when this series is literally incorporating, like, not just Christian, like, not just mainstream Christian, but, like, I forgot the particulars, but Robert Jordan included some elements of Gnosticism, and that's just a really out there brand of Christianity. Yeah. I'm not sure if it exists anymore, but they were pretty out there.
Yeah.
He's incorporated elements of Judaism, Islam, the Dragon's Fang and the Tear of Tar-Valon, the yin yang symbol. It's like, I don't know how you can read that series and be such a prescriptivist.
It doesn't. It's like the people who it's like bigots who are really into Star Trek, and I'm like, I don't understand how you can sit there and watch Star Trek and then turn around and say, like, oh, Star Trek is getting too woke. What? It doesn't make sense.
It's about exploring something beyond what you know.
Yes. And, like, even if you go back and watch the original series, it was still it's extremely progressive for its time. We may watch it and be like, oh boy, there were some missteps made, but for its time, it was very progressive. And it's like, it's the same. I don't understand people who are like drawn to a series like Wheel of Time that is very obviously an exploration in like cultures and different thoughts. I mean, if you just look at the prophecies, I could sit and think about and talk about the prophecies of the dragon all the time and the difference and like how different cultures have different ones and different interpretations.
Yeah.
But they're all different, but all simultaneously true.
Yeah.
It's so cool. It's so cool. And it's, it just doesn't reconcile in my brain how people can read that and then turn around and say, but no, this Wheel of Time is only for this particular group of people. And that's it.
No. Like, what I'm fascinated by in the Wheel of Time is that there are so many countries and so many cultures, and they all have their way of talking. Like, Ilion has its own dialect, and where Leandrin's from? Amadicia?
No. Shit.
This is what happens when you skip out James.
God damn, this is what happens when...
Yeah.
I know. James is gonna... I mean...
She's from North Harbor.
Yeah.
There we go.
She's always out fiddling about that North Harbor.
She's always about North Harbor.
There you go. She forwent her home country. But, like, yeah, the way she styles her hair.
Terabon.
Yes. Yeah, that's it.
Yes.
Yeah, and so it's like they have language, they have culture, they have style, they have traditions, like the wedding knives from, God, I'm so bad with the countries right now.
From Ibudar?
It's the one in the south. It's Italian. Yeah. Ibudar was the city, right?
Yeah, I don't remember the larger area. Oh, boy.
And so, like, it's not just the Aiel who have their own culture, but, like, everybody does. And, like, Saldea has very rich culture, and stuff like that. And so... And you can't say, like, well, these are the English. You know, my friend and I tried to do this exercise. We're like, well, Andor is England and Caroline is France. But, like, after a while it breaks down. It's like...
Yes.
because it takes so much from everywhere. And that's just so rich and so... And, like, everybody can point to it and say, oh, that's me. That's a little bit of me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Like, there is no one for one.
No.
Yeah.
And what I like is that it's not necessarily tied to skin color as well. Like some places you may find like they're like more people of like similar types of skin color are naturally, you know, in one area, but it's not necessarily. Like it's that's not how this world is divided up. And that is extremely cool to me. Like that's really, really interesting. And I think it's kind of unique too. Like it's not often that you get this kind of fantasy series, like this kind, like a way of like this kind of world building in a fantasy series. Because fantasy, like up until kind of recently, and with obviously there are always exceptions. There are always going to be exceptions, but mainstream fantasy has always kind of followed the same general formula with some deviations, but the same general formula where you have like, you know, the farmer who's like the young savior, and you have like the sort of city or like country that's supposed to mirror like England or something, or like the medieval times or something like that, and it's all very much the same. Like there's not a whole lot of, you know, and then you'll have like one country that is the other, and they are supposed to be like, oh, these are where the people of color live. They're separate from everyone else, you know? Like it's...
Yeah.
And there's like one or two of them who are the good ones.
Yes.
Exactly. They're either lesser than or so esoteric that nobody understands them.
Exactly.
It's like...
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I'm doing my first read through of The Lord of the Rings right now, and it's very Judeo-Christian. I mean, which, you know, Tolkien set out to build a mythology for England, and I think that's fine. I think, you know, when you're writing the first kind of thing of that kind, which The Lord of the Rings was, like, okay, sure, yeah. I mean, if you want to build, and it's beautifully done, like, The Lord of the Rings is just, it's an almost spiritual experience for me reading through it the first time. But what it made me realize is that so many of the chosen one tropes, the small town in the starting in the beginning of the adventure trope, like, these things are so well done by very few people. Like Tolkien, like Frodo does not want to be chosen. And in fact, he's not chosen by fate, he's chosen by the ring. Rand, his whole journey is about how being the chosen one is objectively a horrifying experience. So it's like the quote unquote greats in the white male canon are also so much better than most of what we're getting in the mainstream white male today, because it's these mediocre white guys who don't understand why Tolkien and Jordan were amazing. They just like, ooh, the chosen one, that's cool. I'm going to make a chosen one. And then you get like bland shit that just seems like paint by numbers. But that's the thing. Like, I mean, at the time when Tolkien was writing Lord of the Rings was revolutionary at that time. Like, this had never been to this scale. It had never really been done before. And there's a reason why Tolkien is the blueprint for a lot of fantasy series going forward. And there's nothing wrong with that. But like, at the same time, Tolkien had a very specific vision as to what he wanted his world to be like, just like Jordan had a very specific vision about what he wanted his world to be like. And it's fascinating to see the progression of the Wheel of Time, where like you start off with what you think is going to be a very Tolkien-esque sort of journey with Rand at the beginning, and he has some friends, but they're probably not going to be as important as Rand. They're sort of along for the ride. And then you get by the time you get to the second book, you start to realize like, this is going to be a different, this is not going the way that I thought this was going to go. Yeah. Things are veering off. And then by the time you get to the third book, it's like a whole other, like there's a reason why people say the third book is really where it kicks off, you know? Because it sort of veers into this massive world that, you know, the characters didn't know about. I wasn't expecting, as like the first time I read it, I was not expecting all of that. And just like the different, I don't know, it's fascinating. It's really, really fascinating.
Yeah. We keep talking about Tolkien and Jordan, and like, especially with Tolkien being so heavily invested in Christianity, and there's a lot of Christian symbolism in the books. I'm not as familiar with Lord of the Rings, but I am very familiar with the Wheel of Time, and like, there is no one organized religion. Like, there's no clergy, there's no church, there's no, like, everyone knows about the Dark One, and their own cultures have their responses to the Dark One, and there's the Creator, and there's the Light, but there's no expectation that in order to, like, you're going to be reborn, it doesn't matter, and it has nothing to do with the Dark One or the Light, or the Creator. It's just...
It just is.
It just is. And I think it's how fascinating is, like, religion may be like a deep undercurrent that's being drawn from or symbolizing the books, but it's not the core of the books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it too. Like, you could argue, I guess, that, like, the pattern is, like, a form of, like, it's kind of a religion in that everyone believes, everyone is aware, or maybe not everyone, but people are, at least have a concept, an idea of it. That this is just what it is. Like you said, Poppy, it's just what happens. And so that could kind of be argued as a religion, but not really, because there's no organized, like, it's certainly not an organized religion. Like, there's no, like you said, there's no church. Like, the closest people to, like, an organized religion would be the White Cloaks.
Yeah. And
even that, that's a perversion of things.
They're extremists.
Yeah, but even that is not focused on, like, a particular belief. It's not focused on, like, aside from, like, Aes Sedai are evil.
Yeah.
You know, or of the Dark One. But, like, there's no...
It's just the light.
It's just the light. It's even that. It's really cool that it's structured, because you're right. There's a ton of symbolism throughout the book, like, taken from different places, but there's no, like, it's not, there's really no religion. It's just...
They're secular people.
Yeah, exactly.
Not to bring Tolkien back, but it's almost like the Lord of the Rings is a pre-religious world, because there also isn't religion in Tolkien. Like, we know that these these deities, these things, this power exists.
Right.
And that's just it. And the Wheel of Time is a post-religious, post-industrial world, because what led to the, besides women looking for, women's empowerment, land fear, of course. What destroyed the world? It was the drive. It was the drive for a power.
Yeah.
And I almost wonder. I'm sure that The Lord of the Rings was lambasted as being blasphemous for daring to put Christian symbolism in a made-up fantasy world. Just like I'm pretty sure that Robert Jordan was lambasted for like including themes of like multiculturalism and multi-religions in his world. So it's just so fascinating how those two sort of bookend in my mind, and I didn't really think about it until just now.
Yeah.
And I think we've almost entered an era in which I would say a post-religion era as far as fantasy goes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like the fantasy books that I've read, either the ones that I've enjoyed the most or the ones that deal with religion as a power structure that needs to be dismantled or just do away with it altogether.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which is very interesting to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like what I'm seeing. I don't know. Fantasy always kind of frustrates me a little bit because, like, I love it. It's my favorite genre, but my God, it frustrates me sometimes. And so it's interesting to see sort of the newer style fantasy series coming up and seeing how they're sort of expanding on the idea of fantasy, and then also kind of regressing almost in some way, like in weird ways. It's just. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the fantasy genre as on a whole like continues to evolve, as and how much of what's going on in society like nowadays is going to impact that, because I don't think it's possible for it not to. Like it's you may try that for that not to be the case, but I don't know that it's possible for it not to really play a role. You know what I mean? Like it's, I don't know. Yeah, it'll be, but I'm not the writer. Matt is the writer. So I don't know.
The future of fantasy is exciting. This sort of goes back to like the whole thing, like people complaining about this is woke or that is woke. I wonder if the word woke had been in existence back then, would Jordan's own books have been called woke fantasy?
Oh, for sure they would.
And would Tolkien's books have been called woke fantasy? Tolkien didn't write allegory, but there's very, very pro-environmentalism, anti-industrialism themes. And it's like with The Wheel of Time, you can't correlate a specific religion. Gandalf is a woman now. Like multiculturalism out the wazoo.
Gandalf is a woman, and also she fucks women.
And she fucks.
And there it is. And she fucks.
It's very interesting because I was in my teenage Muslim bubble when I was reading this the first time, and I saw none of it. I was like, oh yeah, this is exactly the way it's written. And then, there were points where I would get angry with Rand because I'm like, Moiraine is the person of authority here. She's the person who knows the things. Why aren't you following her orders? And now that I'm older, I'm like, okay, I understand where he's coming from. He can't trust anybody. As much as he would like to trust Moiraine, he can't. And that makes sense. But before it's like, you have to trust the authority. You have to do what the authority says. And so that was a big part of the reason why I was like so angry in the majority of the books. I'm like, what is Egwene doing? Yeah, but that's her character.
That's the thing. Like I struggled a lot with Egwene in my first read. I will be honest, I disliked her quite a bit.
Yes.
In my first read.
Me too.
And I'm not, I not that I necessarily feel bad about it, but I'm glad that I've done a couple of reads as I've gotten older. Yeah. Because your perspective changes as you get older. And also as you get out of, as I've gotten, now I don't know that I would label myself as a Christian with a capital C or a small c really. but I definitely still believe in God or a higher being or whatever you want to call it. But it's because the Christianity that I grew up with, women, you don't aspire for anything.
Mm-hmm.
Nope, you are the homemaker.
Yes, you don't aspire for anything. Your role is to be silent and to help and to be a good little helper is what you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
As a woman. And
help meet.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh my God, Matt, that word just catapulted me back.
I'm sorry. I just traumatized like half of our viewers, listeners, I mean.
That catapulted me back. Oh my God.
2/3 of your podcasters, yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you know what? That's what this episode is for. It's fine.
Yeah. Well, that's something that I also noticed about the women in the Wheel of Time. There's not a shy one among them. Nobody's shy. No one's afraid of, like, getting abused. No one's like, they're leading the show. And, you know, it took me 40 years into my last reread having to do with the with the show, where I'm like, oh, wait a minute. The men messed up the world. This is a society led by women. The women are the men here.
Yeah.
This is why it wasn't adding up before, because in my mind, I just couldn't see, like, a society where, like, the men weren't the ones out, like, making things happen and the women were the ones, like, taking care of things at home. And so that's when I was like, okay, yeah, this was way woker than I ever thought.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, these are kind of light spoilers, but it goes even further, because by the end of the series, the only conclusion, like the only way that things get solved, is by men and women collaborating.
Yes.
And that's literally the only way that they end up coming out okay-ish in the end. It's with that collaboration and that seeing that, you know, seeing the sort of beginning of that, and that the way they got to with the breaking and everything like that, it was by, like, not collaborating. That, like, you know, people were kind of off doing their own thing, and that's how they got to the state that they're in when we start the books, and that the way that they finish things off is by a huge collaboration. And I mean, even that, like, that's, like, I feel like that was really, I don't know. It felt very progressive when I was reading it, because it's, you know, from like a cis-het white Christian man, Southern man who's writing this. It's like, you know?
Yeah, and it's about balance, and so, like, everything leads to balance, and that's why you have the ancient symbol of the Aes Sedai, which is like the yin and yang.
Yeah.
Which, again, in of itself is a symbol of balance, and, like, lots of religions are based on that. Like, Asian and Eastern religions are based on this idea of, like, you find inner peace, you find inner balance, and, you know, it's not one or the other.
Yeah, exactly.
This reminds me of the origins of the Wheel of Time. Like, the entire concept of time in the series is inherently anti-Christian, because in the Judeo-Christian world, time had a beginning. In the beginning was God, the Word, etc. And then there is the end. There's Armageddon.
Yeah.
Day of Judgment.
Whereas with a lot of Eastern religions, and even, you know, in like Norse mythology, like, there is a beginning and there is an end, but they are not the beginning nor the end. So Ragnarok is not the end of all things. It is the end of the current state of things, and it begins a new cycle.
Right.
So the entire foundation, like the entire concept of time, is inherently not Christian, which is funny, which is it's fantastic. And the fact that people don't realize that when they're like, oh, Robert Jordan wrote a Christian, this, that. I just...
Like, I feel like you keep using that word. I do not think you know what it means.
Nope.
And it's like, this is why I'm always going to defend Robert Jordan, because we rag on cishet white men here a lot. Many times for good reason.
What?
Many times for good reasons, because, Lord, they are some headaches.
My God. They do some shit.
But when you get a cishet white man who breaks out of societal barriers and expectations like Robert Jordan did in the 90s, he's still it's not like he's operating within a system that he's trying to subvert.
Yeah.
So I don't blame him or shit on him like some people do for not including non-binary power options or like having such a big gender divide, because that was his world, and what he was trying to do was break that. And because he and many queer and POC writers, in addition to him, because they broke those things in the 90s, now we are able to have fantasy where gender is fluid or non-existent or whatever you'd like it to be, or multiculturalism is the norm, racism is in the past. Like, I'm not saying that Robert Jordan is responsible for like breaking that, because he's not, but like Robert Jordan and a legion of other fantasy writers who were operating within an obsolete system tried to break it, and they did break it. And now we have a new system which is better, I think. But we still shouldn't blame them for not predicting the system that would come about when they broke the old one, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think I genuinely believe that if Robert Jordan was alive today, and were writing Wheel of Time today, I think he would do things differently. Yeah. I think because he would have new, access to new information, new idea, new terminology, Yeah.
We would still be theorizing about what's going to happen at the end of the series.
Of course.
That would be cool. I wouldn't mind that. But also, yeah, I think he would definitely move with the times. This is not to say that you can never, shit on stuff that aged poorly, because some stuff is just bigoted and it wasn't great when it was out, and it's even worse now. Yeah. But that's not the point. That's not the thing with Robert Jordan.
No.
Yeah. Well, there are areas where we talk about like, oh, he missed this, and he did, but like, unlike the rest of us, we're all human. We all have inherent bias, and so I like to think he was trying to challenge his inherent bias, and that's how like we got the product that we have now. Yeah. But you try your best.
Yeah, and I honestly think I think he got a lot more right than he did wrong.
Yes. Yeah.
Compared, like, if you're looking at everything on a whole as a whole, like the whole entire product, he got a lot more right, and I think it's created a lot more good than bad. The fandom is a perfect example of that, because some of there's a small number of people who are just the worst and are always up to something, but on a whole, it's just a really delightful group of people, and there are so many queer people, and it makes me so happy to see that in a fantasy fan series fandom. It's so exciting, and I think it really is a testament to the work that Robert Jordan did with Wheel of Time and the world that he created, and his efforts to make it as inclusive and as progressive as he knew how to do. And I think that's the key. It's the way that he knew how to do it, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I deeply appreciate that.
One of the things that he did that helped me expand my horizons was actually the polycule. And I know,
yes,
and I know that there's work to be done with the polycule, and there's been much discussion about it. But one of the things in Islam is that a man is entitled to marry up to 4 women legally,
right?
And my grandfather did that, and it's not so. Wow. Wait, he married a woman. She had 16 children. This is in the early 1900s. And then he was looking for a wife for his eldest son and was like, you know what? I'm going to marry her instead. So my grandmother was the mistress.
Oh my God.
That's not the right way to use, this is how Islam is great on paper, because it says,
sure, a
man can do this, but, he has to have the approval of his other wives. And, it's supposed to be, in my mind, I could interpret it as being a polycule that works, in a healthy way where it's equal to everybody. It's not just one man getting 3 women.
Right.
But, that's not how it's practiced. More often than not, 99% of the times, if a person does this, it's because they're cheating on their wife, but they can be like, haha, it's legal.
Right.
And it's like a trope in Syrian television. It's like, oh, well, this guy, he did this. It's not commonly done. It's not like Muslim men are going out and doing this a lot. You know, it's very monogamous. But, you know, the way that Elaine and Avienda have a relationship and the fact that, like, the three of them got together and they're like, okay, we're going to bond you, Rand. And, like, the fact that it was kind of balanced. It wasn't Rand going around saying, like, these are my women. And I'm like, okay, right. Well, okay, polycules can be different. There doesn't have to be a power dynamic. It could be some... Well, that's what the three of them are into. That's great. It's great that they all get along.
Yep.
And so that was actually an aspect of my religion that I saw in the books. I'm like, oh, okay, this can be really nice. Yeah, there's work to be done.
That's so cool. Yeah.
This is not to negate any of the conversation that happened before, like, the points that were raised before. They're very valid. But I'm like, this is one aspect where it kind of worked out.
Yeah. It's like, no, but it's, and I think that's what's so cool about the series is that we can find bits and pieces of it where we see ourselves in it. And we're like, or see our history sort of in it, or like our culture in it.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, this is really cool. This feels... It just, I think that's why people have such, like, a connection to it. And, I mean, I want to preface this by saying the book cloaks are terrible, and they are the worst. But I do think this is why people get so, like, about the series.
Yeah.
Because there is something that you do connect to it on a really deep level. And I think when that connection is sort of formed in a negative way, if that makes sense, it produces a lot of negativity.
Negative results. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's what's, that's unfortunately what's happened, because this series, I think it just has this way of just sort of gripping you and really, like, it just locking you in. And, it's, I think that's what's happened to all Wheel of Time fans, for better or for worse. And I think a lot of the time it's for better. It's
really an education in checking yourself and checking your bias, like, because we all feel strongly about a lot of opinions and we disagree. Like, I very strongly, like, had to, like, kind of take a walk and kind of step back, like, with Leanne, the casting of Leanne. In my mind, Doin is an Arab country.
Okay.
They have the diaphanous clothing, they have the veils. I'm like, belly dancers. Then they have the coppery skin, and I'm like, yeah, those are Arabs. And even then, like, Domani just sounds like it would be an Arab word. And so, when I saw Leanne cast, I was like, well, she's not Arab. But at the same time, there's so many Muslim women, so many Arab women. Faris, he's Lebanese. Yes, he's the villain who wants to blow everything up, but he's sophisticated about it.
He's snazzy about it.
Yeah, so it's not your usual, like, unwashed, screaming, bearded guy.
Right, yeah.
If you're doing a terrorism while hot, is it still terrorism?
Is it still terrorism?
No.
I don't think it is.
No, it's sexy.
Episode title. If you're doing a terrorism while hot, is it still terrorism?
Oh no!
I love it.
I mean, we've had worse titles. Listen, we've had more, comparatively.
We've had worse titles.
That's usually my favorite part of the episode. Where's the title?
Where's the title? Where we can find the title. Oh my god. Oh boy. Is there anything else? Do we have any other? I don't know. I could I could sit and talk about, like, the Wheel of Time and religion and just, like, the way that people connect to it. I could sit and talk about it all day. But
same.
We are not going to do that because you know why? Camille will murder us.
Yes.
Camille will get on a flight, we'll get on a plane, and or they'd just be like, we're not releasing the episode. It's not going to happen. Or they'd be like, okay, you edit it, and then
and that's the worst option.
Which is the worst. Trust me, it's the worst option. Nobody wants that. So
one of these days, when James is also absent, I'm going to do a whole spiel on Tolstoy's War and Peace and the concept of free will versus not free will, and how it ties in with the pattern. The joke is, like, I said at one point that the Wheel of Time has a lot of issues of free will that Tolstoy dealt with, and James said nope, and I said yes. And then Michael Livingston, his book didn't cite Tolstoy, but certainly cited philosophical free will arguments. So
that's awesome. Yeah, that's a big debate.
Is that a win for you?
That's a win for me, yes.
Okay.
It's a big debate in Islam because we believe everything is written out for us and fated, but we also have free will, so... And that's kind of like the pattern being woven for you, and with Taviran kind of playing with it, but yeah.
Yeah.
You just gotta make your peace. I practice free will all the time.
Yeah. You just gotta do it. Christianity is kind of like that, too.
Yeah.
With or some forms of, different denominations of Christianity have that as well, where, God has planned everything out, but you also have free will. And my brain is like, what?
Yeah.
How? Explain.
Yeah.
Yes. Explain, please.
Explain, please.
Well, I think that about wraps it up. Poppy, where can we find you on socials?
Well, I am just on Twitter or X or Roman numeral 10.
We calling it Twitter. We're not doing that muskrat thing. It's Twitter.
Okay. I'm on Twitter at Poppy Tea Leaf, and I'm on Discord under the same name.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
Nice.
Well, thank you so much for everybody who has listened to this and continues to listen and support us. You can find us on all of our socials at Queers of Time, and we also have a Patreon where you can do a lot of fun and exciting things like talk show theories, talk book stuff, and...
On the Patreon?
Shit, on Discord. We have... Camille, scrap it, and let's pick...
Camille, don't touch it. Don't touch this. Continue, Matt. Keep going.
On Patreon, you can get advanced recordings and other fun things. I, in theory, should be doing book reviews, but I haven't done that in a long time. And on Discord, you can engage in discussions and theories and stuff like that. That's what I meant to say, Discord. And that is it. Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all for listening. This was Queers of Time, a Wheel of Time podcast. The music is Dance of the Witches by Julius H.